Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting back into our talks about the Immortal Hulk, to where for the most part it probably seems to a lot of people like Al Ewing is just pulling this immortality thing out of nowhere. And I mean, in a way he kinda is, but what I appreciate about it is how it's done by retconning this new explanation with the One Below All and connecting this element of resurrection with events that we've seen with the Hulk throughout the years. So in this video I want to dive back into a bit more of that and more specifically focusing on Doc Samson and Rick Jones. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so picking up where I'd left off about the untimely death of Betty when she had been sniped by Agent Burbank, who was actually aiming for Banner, and regardless of being ordered to stand down, Burbank still took the risk and took the shot, which of course led him to shooting the wrong heat signature and killing Betty, which then brought Burbank a whole lot of trouble that he ain't trying to see right now. And aside from shooting a hole in the Hulk's head and then mentioning he's gonna go toe to toe with the Hulk, to where at this point Burbank is talking like a piece of his brain missing, cause I can name 30 plus Hulks that you couldn't hang with on their worst day. But it was at this moment that Burbank got like that answered prayer of every person who can't fight. Like when they standing in the face of destruction, they just hoping that somebody will intervene. And for Burbank, this is exactly what happened when we got the arrival of Doc Samson. And so now as far as Doc Samson, who has died in the past before as well, because if we go back to Incredible Hulks 610, and back at the time we got a few similarities that kind of are lingering around here. Because one, Betty died after being killed by Scar, the son of the Hulk. But also around this time you got your heroic ending from Doc Samson, to whom back around this time during World War Hulks, he was a bit of a questionable character. He had been placed under mind control by MODOK, which gave him this duality to where you have your evil side, which was Samson, and then your side that was good, that was just known as Leonard. But at this point in time with Betty's death, Samson had kind of saved her by saying all you have to do is make her angry, which I would more so say at the time brought her back from the brink of death more so than like an official resurrection, because when it comes to Hulk, you gotta earn those. We ain't just giving them out around here. But also at the time she had lashed out on Samson, mostly at her frustration at his involvement of her initial transformation. But fast forward to a point in time later within World War Hulks, when it came down to the point of Bruce Banner needing to absorb all the energy from the hulked out heroes, because essentially he was the only one who could do it and not be killed. While this procedure was going underway, the time was cutting close, so Doc Samson had stepped in because the machinery was going to fail before the procedure was complete. But with him stepping in and absorbing what he could, it ended up killing him. But as it turned out, with his death here, it was the last of any influence that MODOK had on him. But back at this time with him helping Banner out, Doc Samson was able to absorb some of the energy and help the machine hold out long enough to restore all the heroes back to normal, which had also gave Banner the opportunity to absorb the rest of the energy, finally turning him back into the Hulk who hadn't shown up in some time. And back then wasn't nobody happier about this than Scar, who just wanted to fight him and kill him. Kids these days. And so after this, Doc Samson, who was brought back briefly during the time of Chaos War, and during Chaos War a lot of people had came back, Banner's parents, both Brian and Rebecca Banner, and like that's how we had got our original face off with the Devil Hulk. And overall around this time there were a lot of people who were brought back from the dead, like throughout the whole entire Marvel universe, and mainly because of the Chaos King's assault on the realms of the dead, which freed a lot of people during this time, but it was only temporary. So then at the conclusion of Chaos War, a lot of those people went back to the respective realms, and at the time that was very much the same case for Doc Samson. So now fast forward to like Civil War II, like not too long before the Hulk was killed by Hawkeye. It was towards the beginning of Civil War II where we had got the return of Doc Samson, to where at the time we didn't get much of an explanation how he came back, and at that time when he returned he really didn't go into much detail about it, because Captain Marvel was like, I heard you died, and he was like, yeah I did, but I'm better now. And I'm telling you, I couldn't have been at the Triskelion like typing at the computer. I would have looked over my shoulder like, well y'all ain't gonna ask him no more questions? Like how you just gonna die and come back like that? Like who you think you is, Duncan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod? And for those of you that didn't catch that, that's an old Highlander thing, you know Highlander, there can be only one. I mean, like if you ain't get it, it's okay, I'm a little angry on the inside, but it's alright. But more or less at this time, Doc Samson had only described where he's at as being in between balancing his life as a superhero and as a psychoanalyst, and that's really all we had been given up until this point. And that's one of the things I mean when I talk about how I appreciate Al Ewing bringing in either new concepts or ideas or returning characters, but doing so with tying them to pre-existing events. But so with Doc Samson returning now and speaking to the Hulk, he explains to him that process, filling in all the gaps from his return to the land of the living all the way up to this point. And essentially he mentions that he was in darkness and then he saw a green door which he just walked through, and just like that he was back. And so keep in mind, at this point in time for Doc Samson, he doesn't have all the answers that we've seen throughout throughout the course of Immortal Hulk. So initially at the time of his resurrection, he went to see S.H.I.E.L.D. and they had tested and cleared him. He had no more influence from MODOK or the leader, but even still they didn't have all the answers to how exactly he came back. But with him going to S.H.I.E.L.D. initially to try and get these answers, this is how Carol Danvers discovered he was back when she made her request to see him back at the beginning of Civil War II. But aside from his appearance at the time meeting up with her at the Triskelion, he had laid low for the most part, but he was still aware of things that were happening and going on, like Amadeus Cho curing Banner and becoming the new Hulk, to which at the time Doc Samson admits that he believed that Banner had some unexpressed feelings about that taking place. But with him going back and forth at the idea of actually confronting Banner and asking him about it, news broke that the Hulk had been killed, and Doc Samson had felt like he had missed his opportunity to get these answers and make this evaluation with his good friend. But it wasn't really till later, to the death of Rick Jones, when Doc Samson had ran across Betty, who immediately thought he was still under MODOK's control. But after bumping into her at Rick Jones' gravesite, it was really from there that they began to keep in touch, and after some time, after having communication with Betty, this is how Doc Samson began to hear about the Hulk sightings, and this is where he initially became aware that Banner had returned from the dead. And so now initially explaining all of this to the Hulk was pretty rough because the Hulk had a piece of his brain missing, and through most of the conversation, Doc Samson was getting the mess beat out of him. So because of that, the Doc had to take some hits while waiting for the Hulk to be able to respond properly. And when he does, the first thing that he mentions to Doc Samson is Betty. And when they go back to check on her, they see that she's gone. And much like in World War Hulks, when Doc Samson had mentioned that Betty's not dead, he mentions the same thing here. But in addition to her body being missing, they also notice a hole in the other side of the house, which is where she likely made her exit during all the other commotion. But it's also at this time that Hulk tells Doc that he knew that Banner seeing Betty at this time was a bad idea. And it's here where Doc Samson pries a bit further about the Hulk's communication with Banner, and the Hulk elaborates, telling Doc about the Hulk that got out during Secret Empire, and telling Doc how that Hulk who was helping Hydra was completely unhinged, but then telling Doc that he doesn't have to worry about it because that thing is in pieces, locked away where this Hulk used to be. And this whole mention of locking a Hulk away and setting another one free, it intrigues Doc Samson because recently he's been asking around and he's spoken to Tony Stark, and more specifically about the incident that we talked about earlier on the playlist when the Hulk had wrecked the Avengers, to where at the time that Hulk had specifically responded to Devil Hulk. And when he had heard this from Tony, this reminded Doc Samson of a time where Bruce had told Doc that there was a Hulk that he had specifically locked away in his mind that Bruce had also referred to as a Devil Hulk. And he remembers Bruce mentioning that he needed to lock him away because if he had ever let him out, that he would destroy the world. And so for Doc Samson, just really trying to get to the bottom of this, he tells the Hulk, hey, look me in my lumped up eye and tell me, are you that Devil Hulk? And the Hulk's almost like, well, it took you a while to figure that out. But he also goes on to explain to him as they leave, because the Hulk tells him that there's somewhere they gotta be. But from here, I like how Doc Samson asked the question without asking a question, because he can tell at this point that the Immortal Hulk is sick and tired of answering these questions. So Doc Samson just mentions, well, gee, I'm glad that you ain't trying to destroy the world. Then he just waits to kind of see what he's gonna say, just waiting for that answer. But then he kind of gets the same answer that he feared, but not exactly in the way that he expected, because the Immortal Hulk then tells him that, oh yeah, the human race, it gotta go. But from his new perspective, it's more so towards the reasoning of the human race is already taking themselves out, and they're doing a great job at it. And on top of that, he also believes that the humans are too weak and too puny to even admit that they're destroying themselves. But on the contrary, if the Immortal Hulk were to take care of it, then in the end, when it's all said and done, there will actually be more survivors. And so now, I'd have to say the craziest thing about this whole explanation is that it actually lines up with what the Hulk said back in Avengers No Surrender. Because it was back at that time where this most recent incarnation of the Hulk, the Immortal Hulk, really took his strides and moved in this direction. And so now Doc Samson just kind of got this blank stare like, oh word? Yo, that's crazy. And it's funny because with the Hulk telling him this, like, what he gonna do? Like, the best chance that he has is to talk the Hulk down and have him do the least amount of damage as possible. And Samson is aware of that because he knows, just a few minutes ago, he got lumped up before. He don't want to get lumped up again. So he knows that he got to take a more psychological approach. But so when they arrive at the cemetery, and when they get there, Samson knows immediately where they're at. And much to his surprise, because initially Samson thought they was going to go after Betty. But Hulk's like, no, you don't have to worry about Betty. She took a bullet to the head, ran through a wall, she's fine. In the same way that you died died, came back, and you're fine. The same with Banner. And now as the same it is with Rick Jones. Because apparently everyone who has been a Hulk in some way or form is capable of coming back from the dead. And this they see as they look over Rick Jones' empty grave. But as it turns out, Rick Jones didn't just get up and walk out of here, but actually he was taken by Shadow Base, or better yet taken to Shadow Base Site B under the orders of General 14, and they've been making their attempts to revive him by using the gamma saturated remains of Emil Blonsky to revive and then weaponize Rick Jones. And it's crazy because throughout the course of this process, it's almost as if the two of them can sense each other while this is happening, with Rick sensing something or someone who doesn't want to be human, and it's someone or something very angry. And that is crazy. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Like, that's enough Immortal Hulk Black Mirror for today. Like, it's getting crazy. But let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.